let's turn then to our first witness this evening, who is Dr Philip Kiszely, cultural historian at the University of Leeds and political commentator, who joins us on the line this evening. A very good evening to you, Dr Kiszely. Now, the Prime Minister has acknowledged tonight that there is a right to peaceful protest, which he says is, to quote, part of the freedom those celebrated on Armistice Day gave so much for. Now, you have said you think the march should be banned. Why?
Yeah, good evening. It's a really difficult one, and I'm torn about this. But ultimately, I think you have to think about who is actually behind the marches, and I think there are 6 main groups behind the marches, 3 of which have Hamas connections, and one of those 3, the Muslim Association of Britain, a former Hamas chief, is connected with that. So I don't think these are actually protests as such. I think these are displays of intimidation, and I think they've been an occupation. They've been an occupation of
well, it's clear. We must just mention there, of course, they're not here to respond to that statement that you just issued.
Yes, but I think the statement is the groups. It's in the press. It's in the general knowledge. So I'd just like to make one more point, and that's that we've seen over the last week or so, we've seen swastikas on the streets of London. We've seen intimidation. I don't think that this protest would allow Israeli advocates to make the argument for even their existence in the centre of London on Saturday, and so that's why I don't think these are protests. These are acts of intimidation.
Yes, we'll just sort of underline that those groups that you've mentioned are not here to respond to what you've said. Carmody, perhaps I can come to you first.
Good evening, Philip.
Hi.
I'd like to get some conceptual clarification about the moral issues here. Do you agree that in this country there is no right not to be offended?
Yes, I do. I'm a free speech advocate. So I like I say, I'm torn with this, but I don't think this is about free speech. This is about shutting down a very vulnerable demographic, which is under 300,000 Jews. I know Jews are frightened to speak out on campus. Jews are frightened to walk in the streets. I've had messages over the last few weeks, people telling me this. So, yes, I think people can be offended, but I don't think people can be terrified for their own skin.
So, just to be clear, it's legal to say and do things publicly in this country that others consider provocative and disrespectful.
Yes, but I don't think it should. I don't think that includes things like from the river to the sea, for example.
Okay, so there's a distinction between being offensive and inciting violence. That's yes. Enshrined in our law, isn't it?
Yeah.
So let's take it as read that we live in a country where it is legal, so to speak, to give offence, but not legal to incite violence. Now, can we have a focus particularly on what people are and aren't allowed to do on this day? It is illegal on any day to incite violence, and it's legal on any day to do things that others find provocative and disrespectful. You seem to be suggesting, if I've understood you correctly, that there's something different about this day, which means different norms should be applied. Can you just talk us through that?
Well, I don't think I am actually suggesting that. I'm suggesting that a protest, if you want to call it a protest, I don't like calling it a protest, but if a protest that has Hamas connections, that is fundamentally anti-Semitic in lots and lots of ways. We've seen swastikas displayed, as I've said, in train stations. We've seen Jews attacked. We saw a person who was carrying a banner saying, Hamas are terrorists. Very
yes.
simple, very straightforward. He was attacked straight away by everybody around him.
Yes.
So I'm not necessarily picking out this day. If I were to talk about this day in particular, I would say that if this demonstration, 1 million people, this is an occupation, it's not a demonstration, 1 million people, if this goes anywhere near the sacred places that Tim was talking about, then that's sabotage. That isn't a demonstration. And
right.
yet I think we do need to
could I just press you on this very point?
Yeah.
You're saying then, if I understand you correctly, there is something different about this day that means that different norms should be applied. And we're not talking about the incitement of violence, because we've already agreed that's illegal on any day. Nobody is suggesting, well, some people may be, but they are, outside the court, so to speak. They're speaking about a different country than the one we live in, which is a country in which it's not legal to incite violence. So let's just leave that aside. Those horrible, horrible things that you've been talking about, we can all agree they're wrong to do on any day. It seems to me you're suggesting that there are some different norms that should be applied about how people behave in public in relation to views that you find offensive on this particular day. Can you confirm that that's what you're saying?
No, because I'm not talking about me and what I find offensive. I'm talking about a articulation, an expression of a culture that is anti-democratic fundamentally and is there to destroy what we are thinking about and what we are reflecting on Armistice Day.
Let me bring in Matthew Taylor there. Matthew.
So just to clarify, I think I know the answer to this question, but just to clarify, if there was to be proposed next year, let's say, an angry demonstration on Remembrance Day calling for better treatment of army veterans, would you oppose that?
I would oppose it if it interfered with the ceremony. I wouldn't. I don't. I mean, I'm not. No. Let's be clear. Just let me finish. Let me finish the point, please. I am a free speech advocate. I'm perfectly okay with demonstrations. The Republican demonstrations. I'm perfectly fine with it. But if these demonstrations are there to sabotage, then I don't think they should go ahead, or I think they should be removed and pushed further away. My point is, any day, if there is intimidation on the streets, if there are 1 million people, if Jews are frightened to leave the house, then that is not demonstration, that is occupation, it's intimidation.
But let's be clear, the organisers of this march are not going to go anywhere near the cenotaph, so they're not going to disrupt the proceedings, and they are explicit about the fact this will be a peaceful protest. It would be embarrassing for them were it not to be. Now, clearly you don't believe that, but I've been on a lot of demonstrations in my life, and I've often felt embarrassed or annoyed by the behaviour of some of my fellow protesters. But if we banned all demos because we were concerned that some people might misbehave, we wouldn't have any demos, would we?
Well, no one's suggesting that we should ban all demos, and no one's suggesting that we should ban any demos. No, I'm not. I'm suggesting we define the word demo, and this is not a demo. This is something different. It has a different objective. If you've got the smallest, most vulnerable demographic in your country literally frightened to leave the house, then that isn't a demonstration.
But as we heard, there are going to be Jewish people on the demonstration, and the organisers have said that it's going to be peaceful. So what you're saying is that, in a sense, it shouldn't take place because you don't believe the assurances that have been given, and because a small minority of people may do appalling things on the demo, then the whole demo should be banned. Isn't that the problem? Which is, this is a slippery slope. Once we start saying, well, you can't have that demonstration because you might have some hardline extremists saying some offensive things, where will that lead us?
I agree, and I'm worried about it being a slippery slope. But I come back to the original point. I mean, it might well be that there are, a handful of Jews in that demonstration with a kind of Stockholm syndrome. But if they dared to say something about the existence of Israel, then they would be under threat. There's a clear and present danger here of violence. There's certainly intimidation. There are 1 million people, thinking about 1 million people here, and a handful of police officers who will not be able to control them. I just want to come back to this idea of there are Jews there, so it must be perfectly okay, and there mustn't be any anti-Semitism. It always reminds me of, you might remember actually, a advert in the 1990s, which was a BNP advert, and it featured an old Sikh gentleman who said he was absolutely full on a real supporter of the BNP, by your logic, then all Sikhs must be supporters of the BNP, and we have to think about certain kinds of people all in an homogenous way, and that really isn't the case. My point is, I know that lots and lots of Jews are terrified.
Dr. Philip Kiszely, thank you very much indeed, and just to underline, of